Takes a while. Okay, perfect. All right, I will start letting everyone in now.
Recording in progress. Welcome everyone to week 2 and session 4 of the Future MDs in STEM summer program. We are super excited to have all of you here with us today, and we hope that you enjoyed week 1. Just some brief updates. So this week we have 3 sessions, one today, one tomorrow, and then one again on Thursday. And then next week we've got our wrap-up session followed by a research symposium on Friday. Again, for those of you that don't have groups for the research symposium yet and you responded to our thread, we're in the process of making groups for you all, and we hope that, if you have any questions, you'll show up to our office hours this Friday. It can be any question in regards to what we're doing here as a team, or if you have any questions about the logistics or our prompt or anything in general.
But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Levi. She's our guest speaker today. I'll let her introduce herself. And as always, if you have any questions for her, she's open to taking them at the end of her presentation, and you can drop them in the chat or you can raise your hand on Zoom, but we'll let her take over.
Thanks so much, you guys. It's such a pleasure to be here with everyone. Let me just share my screen for a moment. Everyone able to see that okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Let me try to pull the chat over here too. Awesome. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really amazed by all the organization that went into putting this together for you folks, and also for all of the excitement and the enthusiasm that I can see in the chat already for everyone getting involved. You know, it's easy as one goes through, easy as one goes through training to kind of lose sight of the important parts of all of it, which are how amazing it is to be in a STEM field. And I just hope that that curiosity and that excitement continues for you. So my name is, please call me Becky. I am an MD and a PhD by training. I'm a child neurologist. I'm a medical geneticist. I'm also a basic science and translational neuroscientist, and I'm a mom. And so I can't wait to tell you a little bit about what it's like to do that, and encourage any questions. I was just going to give you guys a kind of a brief presentation of what it's like to even kind of get to this point. What in the world have I been doing since college? And let's see if I can advance. There we go. So how do I know if medicine is for me? And we'll kind of break this down into medicine, science, and physician scientists. The good news is they all share a lot of the same qualities. So you need a lot of curiosity. So being curious in particular about biology and chemistry. You need to enjoy working with people and doing teamwork, because that's a lot of what medicine is about, especially academic medicine, meaning working in like a big hospital setting. You need to like to read and to write about science. Because part of being a doctor is that you're constantly writing notes about patients. You're always reading articles and trying to learn more. I think about it as being in lifetime school, because you're always learning as things are changing. You have to want to be a detective for the diagnosis, but try not to be as intense as Dr. House. Stay within the laws and within the rules. But if that's the kind of thing that gets you excited, then that's a good sign that medicine might be for you. And then it helps if you aren't very squeamish about blood, the human body, injuries, gross pictures, things like that, because obviously you'll see a lot of that in your training. So how do I know if science is for me? If you're thinking maybe about like a PhD or an MD PhD or things along those lines. So here, you can be curious about any kind of science, because there's so many different subfields within that. You also should like working with people and on teams, because in science, no one is alone. And so you're always working within a lab group, often a very large one. You have to really love reading and writing about science, because that's what scientists are doing all day. They're doing experiments, but they're writing grants, they're writing papers, they're reading other people's grants and papers and thinking about how ideas come together. You have to be pretty patient to be a scientist. So there's a lot of delayed gratification. So you could do an experiment and you could have a result come back from it in a couple hours, but the big payoff is usually happening over the scale of months, even years, as people are doing their research. And then it helps if you aren't squeamish about handling animals. Like, for example, a lot of work happens in flies, in a special kind of worm called C. elegans. There can be a lot of mouse and rat work. Sometimes people work in baboons, other types of monkeys. You have to not be very squeamish about like stinky or gross or kind of scary chemicals or sometimes radioactivity. And you have to be totally okay with weird smells, because that's kind of a lot of what we do in scientific experiments. And then how do I know if being a physician scientist is for me? So a physician scientist like me, they're really curious about biology or chemistry or physics or bioengineering or some kind of computation or modeling for things that have to do with the human body. Again, like working with people and teams, love writing and reading about science. And then you have to be really curious about the pathophysiology. So this question of why does that happen in the body? If someone has this disease, why does this thing happen? It's nice because there's kind of a mix of instant gratification, which we get in medicine, where like I diagnose a patient, I give them a medicine, they get better over the course of a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And that delayed gratification that happens in science and research, where it can take months and years to kind of see the impact of your work. And then you have to be okay that it takes a while to have career development. So there are a lot more stages to what happens. So what even is a physician scientist? So really, this is just a buzzword for a doctor who spends a significant amount of time, usually more than half of their time, on medically relevant research. So again, trying to figure out either how to make a diagnosis or how to treat a disease. And usually that person works in basic science research. So we'll just define that quickly. So basic science, when people use that term, they mean someone who works at a bench in a lab doing chemistry or cellular work or animal model work to understand why something happens, usually like basic biology or biochemistry. Whereas clinical research is when people are studying patient information about diseases and treatments. And this can either be in the past, so asking people about what it was like when they got diagnosed, or trying to pull together a group of cases over the past 10 years at a hospital. It could be in the present. So right now I enroll in a natural history study where we say, hey, all these people with this particular disease, what symptoms do you have right now? And it can also be in the future. So in other words, I can say, I want to know about your symptoms right now, and I'm going to ask you again every 4 months for the next 5 years in order to try to figure out how things change over time. And then there's the last thing we call translational research. So that basically just says, how do I take basic science, biology or chemistry or something like that, and how do I turn it into clinical research? So why does something such as a particular gene, a certain infection, a toxin or a poison that someone eats, how does that make someone sick? And then how can I treat or cure it to make them better? So here are a few very good reasons not to go into medicine or science. So don't go into this because you think it's going to make a lot of money, because doctors and scientists get paid fine. We're not in trouble. But industry and pharma and consulting and law, those all make a lot more money. So it used to be that doctors were doing really well, and now totally fine and comfortable, but don't think that you should go into it because of what the paycheck is. Don't go into it for the hours, because the days are long, the weeks are long, the weekends are long, and the years are long, both for the training and for what it's like to work. Don't go into it for the honor or the respect. I love it when patients and people who I work with tell me how grateful they are for what I do, but that's not enough of a reason to go into it because not everyone is thankful. And then don't go into it because your parents or your partner or your friends tell you that you should. This is a career path that is, as we've just said, it takes a while, and it also leads to a lifetime of kind of continued service to other people. And you need to really want it for you. So listen to them, and because they might see something about why it is a good fit for you, but make sure that you agree, that you feel the same way. So what is it like to apply to medical school? So we can kind of break this down over time. So most people during undergraduate years, they do what's called the prerequisites. And that usually happens in the first through third years of undergrad, but it can happen later, not a big deal. Those prerequisites are typically biology, chemistry, physics, biochemistry. They change a little bit over time, and certain schools might, request a couple other things, just like English language or stuff like that. But don't stress if you've gotten through all or most of undergraduate years and discovered that you haven't finished all the prerequisites, because there is something also called a post-bac or post-baccalaureate. And that's basically a chance to complete those undergraduate pre-med courses after graduation. So it does cost money, although often there can be scholarships for them. And usually over the course of 1 to 2 years, someone will take and kind of add in whatever classes are missing. And often there's some kind of supplementary mentorship and things like that go along with it. So whenever someone has finished their prerequisites, then they can be ready to take what's called the MCAT. And this is a standardized test that so the earliest someone can take it is after their third year of undergraduate. You can take it later, but definitely you have to have a grade back before you apply. And it's kind of scaled along a curve. And so it's kind of like taking the SATs, except about questions that have to do with biology and chemistry and physics. Then there's the actual application cycle itself. So it happens once annually in kind of late summer, early fall. At this point, it's all online application. I had to fill mine out on paper. That was lots of fun. Usually there is both an essay, there are letters of recommendation. You submit kind of the equivalent of a resume, as well as you give in all of kind of your grades and all the coursework that you've completed. And then schools will take all of that information. Obviously, they're getting hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. They'll kind of sort through them a little bit. And then they often have something called a secondary essay, where they might ask you to kind of write something about a particular question or two that they have that's specific to their school. And then they'll start sending offers for interviews. And usually the interviews happen kind of throughout the fall and into the winter time. Acceptance is kind of what we call rolling. So much the way applying to college, there's a couple of dates when a lot of things get kind of released, but often there's other things that happen in between. It's kind of school by school. And that'll kind of happen starting in the winter and all the way even through into the summer, because they'll have, much like colleges, they'll have a wait list. And so if there's somewhere that someone's still excited about, we really encourage them to stay on the wait list and let the school know how excited they are, because even in my med school class, there was someone who got in off the wait list in, I think, like a few weeks before school started, because someone else had had a family emergency and had to hold off for a year. And then someone starts med school about a year after they applied. So someone applies, I don't remember the exact date, it varies from year to year, but like in August or September, in order to start 1 year later, usually in August or September again. That said, more and more people are taking a year or more off between when they finish undergraduate or college and when they go to medical school or grad school. So that was less common when I applied many years ago, and it's becoming increasingly common that people have taken either time for more coursework or to work or to kind of think about what they want to do, and then they're applying. So it's never a problem if someone is not coming straight from their undergraduate. In fact, often people who've been doing other things have really made sure that this is what they really want and have brought a lot of exciting other skills to the and abilities to the table. So what are med school application panels looking for? They are looking for strong coursework, and someone should be interested in biology in particular, kind of beyond what the prerequisites were. So it's nice that someone took Bio 101, but did they take some other things too to show that they really are genuinely interested in biology? They're looking for someone who can convey that they have good communication. So through essays and through the letters of recommendation and through the things that someone the activities on someone's resume. And they're also looking for a clear passion for medicine. So again, what I was talking about, that someone really loves doing medicine for what it is and not for those other things about like how much you could make or because my parents told me I had to or stuff like that. And then it does help to have some exposure to medicine. So we often call that shadowing, where you might go with a doctor into their clinic or into the hospital. But it's certainly not required. But many people might be interested in doing that just because it helps you figure out whether or not it's for you. So what does the timeline of a grad school application look like? So during undergraduate years, there's no real prerequisites, but you should be able to take some advanced level courses within the subject of interest. During undergraduate and afterwards, research experience is optional, but very helpful. And then the GRE is the standardized test for going to graduate school, but some schools are starting to phase this out. And then we kind of anticipate that more and more of them will be kind of letting it drop. So similar to the MCAT, it can be taken anytime, usually in the third or fourth year of undergrad or even afterwards, and they kind of use it like the SATs. So same idea, you apply about a year before you would start. In general, grad school applications are less standardized and less synchronized, which means that it's hard to keep track of all those timelines and dates, but that's really important. Similar thing, there are essays, you kind of show your coursework and your GPA, there are letters of recommendation. And then the other parts would be like kind of a list of at each school that you apply to, who are some of the mentors that you might be interested in working with and doing research with. They'll also have an interview process, usually through the winter and the fall again, and then rolling acceptance. And graduate schools are looking for someone who's dedicated to science, who's curious and very driven, who's ideally spent time in the lab or out in the field and really enjoyed it. So has already gotten a tiny bit of research experience and is able to know that this is what they really want to spend their life doing. You don't need any prior publications, but it does help. So in other words, finding a lab to work with would be helpful. And then I see someone's asking, what's the difference between graduate school and medical school? So graduate school, you could think about it as a big term for going on to any kind of extra education after undergraduate years. But typically, we give them different names. So for instance, someone who wants to be a lawyer would go to law school. Someone who wants to be a doctor would go to medical school. And someone who wants to get a PhD or an advanced doctorate in science would go to graduate school. It's kind of the generic term for anyone getting a PhD. So in other words, there are different pathways to training. But as we'll talk about in a moment, some people actually choose to do both. Does that kind of help answer that? And yes, someone asked, can you still participate in research with only a PhD? 100% you can. I'll get to that in a moment. Okay. And then the other thing is some people are worried that that in order to get into graduate school, they have to know like exactly what they want to research or exactly who they want to work with. And the answer is you don't need to, but it does help to have some vague areas that someone is interested in or a list of people who would be interesting to work with. So here's the timeline of medical school. So in other words, how someone goes from applying, getting into medical school until they're able to graduate and become a doctor. So first, there's what they call the preclinical years, which is usually 1.5 to 2 years. And in that time, it's mostly lectures. You go to like anatomy lab where you kind of learn about the human body. And you take a lot of tests. Then there's what they call the clinical years, which is usually about 2 years worth. And when that happens, someone basically rotates through various specialties for 2 to 6 weeks each. So for instance, go to see pediatrics, go to see general medicine, go to see surgery, go to see surgery subspecialties, go to see neurology. So in other words, getting some breadth and some experience in all of the major parts of being a doctor in order to both learn about it and then also be able to help figure out which exact type of doctor does someone want to be. And during those years, we read and write a lot of notes about our patients, and we give presentations about our patients, usually every day. Then it's becoming increasingly frequent for people to take some kind of flexible time. So people might take an extra year or two in order to do extra research or to get a business degree or a master's of public health. And so often schools will kind of have either joint programs or an ability to kind of apply into those programs for people who are interested in those things. And as we'll talk about in a moment, this might also be a time when someone would pause and do some science research as well. And then during that 4th and final year of medical school is when people will start applying what we call residency, which is kind of like the internship or the hands-on training that someone gets after medical school when they're already a doctor, but they're learning how to do their specific field. So usually in August of that year, someone will send in an application, they'll interview through the fall and the winter, and then they'll graduate in the spring and start on July 1st. How about what happens when someone starts graduate school? So it's a little bit more kind of overlapping. There's coursework, which is mostly done in the first 2 years or so. Usually there's like a list of like these 5 or 6 classes are required for everyone in your program. And then you can kind of choose X number of classes as a minimum afterwards. And then at the same time, people are trying to figure out which laboratory they want to do research in. And so for instance, you might rotate in between 1 and 3 labs is pretty typical. You might start that during the first year or 2 and then hopefully have chosen a lab by year 2 or 3. And then at the same time, as someone has joined a lab and kind of established there, they might be finishing up some coursework too. And in the meantime, they're working what we call qualifying. So the first step is called the quals, which is basically where someone gets their master's degree in what it is that they're researching, usually taken about 2 or 3 years after they start graduate school. And then you defend your thesis, meaning you'd actually graduate from your PhD program with your final project about 3 to 6 years after you'd started the whole program. What about me? I'm an MD PhD, meaning that I did a little bit of all of the above. And so same thing, I did the preclinical year for 1 or 2 years. I took a couple of graduate schools and did some rotations during that time. Then I swapped over mostly to graduate school where I took the majority of my courses. I finished rotating and choosing a lab. I defended my quals and then I defended my thesis. And I kept on going to clinic about once a month just to keep a little bit of medicine in my mind. And then after that, I returned to medical school and did those clinical rotations for another 1.5 years. I quickly chose what I wanted to apply into, and then I was able to apply. I chose to apply to residency. Other people do what's called postdoctoral research as well. So an MD PhD can take somewhere between 6 and 8 years in total. Usually about 3 of them are devoted to the medical school time, and usually 3 to 5 of them are devoted to the research time. So what happens after medical school? So after medical school, someone usually goes to what we call residency. And it's called that because literally the young doctors used to be residents, meaning living in the hospital. So that was how, because it's not particularly well paid, they basically would get room and board for free in the hospital and then get paid a little bit on top of that. So even though we don't have to live in the hospital anymore, they still kind of call it that. And so that's typically 3 to 6 or 7 years of hands-on clinical specialization. Like I said, it's kind of like the old-fashioned idea of an apprenticeship or an internship, where you would learn directly from the people who are really great at what they do in order to get better at that particular field of medicine. And then after that, people often sign up for what we call fellowship, totally optional. And that's an extra 1 to 3 years of sub specialization. Often there's a little bit of research time in there. So for example, someone might start by being a pediatrician and then might learn how to become a child neurologist or a child geneticist kind of on top of that. So narrowing in even more focused on one part of the body or one type of disease process. And when someone's done with all of that, we call them an attending. So that means they are finally a doctor who is the boss at what they're able to do. They don't have to go to anyone else for advice unless they want to, and they're kind of in charge of the decisions that they make. And so an attending is practicing, they're licensed and they're board certified. And attendings can have a lot of different types of roles. So you could do mostly clinical work. So that could be either in private practice, meaning in like a private office that is not associated with a hospital. It could be in a community practice. So it might be, for instance, in a federal health qualified center or in a county hospital or county clinic or something like that. Or it could be in an academic practice. So for instance, I work out at Stanford, and so it's academic, it's part of a university hospital. Most people who do mostly outpatient work see patients in clinic between 3 and 5 days a week. And then, for instance, if someone were a surgeon, they might operate between 1 and 5 days a week. And then often there's some work in the hospital. So some people do that full time. They only see people who are sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. And some people do it part time. So they do it for a couple of weeks out of the year. But there are other things that doctors can do with their time. So they might teach students and teach residents. This might be a full-time or a part-time thing for them. But many doctors are doing, especially anyone who works in an academic practice, is frequently teaching quite a bit of their time. They might also do clinical or basic science or quality improvement research. So someone I saw asked whether or not someone with an MD can do research, 100%. So my dad is an MD and he does 100% research and has for many years. And then there can be a lot of financial or like business kind of aspect to medicine. So doctors might end up being in charge of running their own private clinic, or they might help out run the clinic for the hospital or for the community practice, or they might be interested in hospital management. And then, of course, there are kind of for-profit types of things, such as working in biotech or in pharma or in bioengineering or bioconsulting. So often there are private companies who would love to have opinions from doctors, either as part-time or full-time in their work, about kind of what might be of interest in the medical field. And then what happens after grad school? So someone who's gotten their PhD or graduated from a science graduate school usually goes on to what we call postdoctoral training or a postdoc. You can kind of think of that as like a residency, but for being in research. So you can either stay on in the same lab or move to a new, different lab, and often work there for between 1 and 5 years. And the idea is you've already shown that you can kind of do good research, and now what you're trying to do is become more independent. So instead of working mostly with your mentors and kind of learning how to do everything, you're saying, hey, now I know how to do research, and I'm going to show that I can do some things, not 100% on my own, but kind of more and more on my own. And that includes publishing papers and applying for grants in order to kind of develop your own questions that you want to answer through your research career. And then if someone is interested in staying in basic sciences over time, they would then find what we call a tenure track job position. And it usually takes 5 or 10 years to make what we call tenure. So that's when someone becomes a professor in something. And during that time, they're writing a lot of grants, trying to publish as much as possible, and also build a lab team. So hiring all of the people to come work for them, getting graduate students and postdocs and lab technicians to come and work with them. But there are other possibilities as well. So that's kind of that's kind of like the NIH goal. NIH is the National Institutes of Health, which help to fund a lot of research training in science. That's what they hope, that they make tenure track professors. But there are lots of other things that people can do with a master's or a PhD in science. And that includes being a research scientist within a larger lab. So in other words, someone who's mostly independent, but does not kind of run their own lab. They might run like a little bit inside of someone else's labs. They might oversee a project and work on it with, maybe up to 5 or 10 people, but be inside of a larger lab that has more funding and support and like a head there. Same thing as we had said for doctors. So a lot of people with masters or PhDs in science go into biotech or pharma or consulting or even advocacy work to try to figure out how to kind of promote science. And then finally, tons of teaching opportunities, either alongside or even like 100% of the time, to teach undergrads, to teach graduate school, things like that. And then what happens after you do an MD PhD? So someone who wants to be a physician scientist. So you could do residency, or you could do a postdoc, or you could do both. You could do a fellowship, or you could do a postdoc, or you could do both. And the key thing is that someone, sorry, folks, can never mute. Thank you.
Square root of 1 is still just 12. But we have
the important thing is that someone needs to find a niche, meaning a small area that they need to kind of bring together both their clinical work and their research work in order to come together and kind of master, a certain disease or a certain type, like basket of diseases. And so typically then you're looking for an academic job in which you might do up to a quarter of your time clinical, meaning seeing patients, and up to about 3/4 or so doing the research that you like to do. And same thing as we talked about for a PhD, working on grants, publications, building a lab. Or you can do an MD PhD and then decide that you learned a lot about science that way that makes you a better doctor, but you just want to do medicine or just want to do research, kind of anything in between. So lots of options. So what are other paths into healthcare? So there are so many other people who are in healthcare besides just doctors. And I think that I hadn't even realized this and wish I'd known about some of these other career opportunities ahead of time. So other people in healthcare include nurses, both in the hospital and in the clinic. Includes people like nurse practitioners or certified nurse anesthetists who have gone to usually like 3 or so years of training and have had a little bit of like an internship or a residency as well, and therefore can practice independently. It includes physician's assistants. So physician assistants go to their own physician assistant training program, which is usually 3 years, and then have their own kind of residency and training for a year or 2 afterwards. And so physician's assistants frequently also kind of work independently in clinic, and much like a nurse practitioner might kind of consult with other doctors in the clinic when there's particularly unusual cases. Instead of going to get an MD or a doctor of medicine, someone can also get a DO or a doctor of osteopathy, which is osteopathic medical schools. And so it's a different application process, and they often have a kind of different grade requirements and things like that. But DOs and MDs can both work at a hospital and both be independent. There's also genetic counselors. So that's someone who has gone to 2 years of training after undergraduate and then often has done some rotations during that time to work in various genetics fields. And they are experts in how to order and interpret and kind of talk to people about genetic testing. There's also pharmacists. So you're probably familiar with the pharmacist that, sits at the back of your Walgreens or your CVS and like gives you the pills. But pharmacists do way more than that. They're not just sitting there like counting out pills and making sure that's in the right bottle with the right label. They are also really important at understanding what drugs, what side effects, how do these drugs interact with each other? And they don't just work at the pharmacy. There's also pharmacists all throughout hospitals and clinics who are helping to double check all of that, who are working with doctors and nurses to try to figure out, how should I give that medicine? What's the best way to combine these things? Is it possible that we're having an allergy reaction? And then finally, there are all of the therapists. So physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists are all incredibly important in how we help treat people who have any type of disease or disorder. So anytime that someone breaks a bone or has a stroke or anything like that. In fact, today, I think I referred all 3 of my patients to go see a particular type of therapist in order to get help and support. And it's a really lovely hands-on field where you're literally teaching people how to get better. So it's a really great field to be in. And then I didn't even mention here like social work, psychologists, Emotional and psychological therapists are, of course, incredibly important in healthcare as well. Okay, what are other paths into research? So we talked about how someone would go about getting a PhD or a doctorate of philosophy of science, but there are many other people who are involved in research. That can include a lab technician. So that's someone, usually you need an undergraduate degree, but plenty of people kind of rotate through labs even before they've done that, who kind of helps with the day-to-day of doing experiments in the lab. Or the parallel to that in clinical research would be a clinical research assistant. So again, often has finished an undergraduate degree, but doesn't have any of the more advanced graduate degree work, and is kind of learning what it's like how do I call patients and enroll them in a study and make sure that I have all their data and enter the data into the database and pull that data and start looking at the analysis. There are also lab managers. So these might be people who are part technician, and then also on top of that, they're interested in how do I keep everything safe in the lab, keep everything ordered, handle all the grants, more of like the financial aspects. There are also research scientists. So that's usually what we call a non-tenure. So it's not like the university has guaranteed you your job until you die. So it's typically someone who has a master's or a PhD who's kind of committed, as we said, to kind of working inside of someone else's lab. And so you don't have to worry as much about the stress of, publishing and grants and all that stuff, but you get to still be really hands-on with the science. And then, of course, there's working in pharma or in biotech. And there's all kinds of technicians, technologists, and scientists who do that kind of more in the private side of things, as opposed to like at universities and hospitals. And then, so I am a pediatrics, meaning I work with children, mostly. I see adults too. I'm a neurologist, which means that I work with the brain. And then I'm also a geneticist, meaning that I try to study genetic disorders as much as possible. So I thought I'd just briefly tell you about why I like those fields. So why choose pediatrics? You gotta love kids. And just, learning to love kids and learning how to play and interact with kids is totally something that you can learn. So it's not like if you're not good at it right now, that you could never become good. You can 100% learn how to be able to interact with children of all different ages. That's something that I used to think, oh gosh, I know that my siblings and my cousins really like me, but other kids run away from me and they're screaming. How could I ever do pediatrics? And then I got to shadow a pediatrician, and he was like, oh, well, if you do this first, you do that first, don't reach out and like immediately try to touch their face. That freaks kids out. Try to touch their foot or their knee or somewhere else, or touch their parent first. And so you can kind of learn skills about how to do these things. If you're like me, then you think that grownups are kind of gross and smelly. And so you'd kind of like to be with kids, even though they have poopy diapers sometimes. And one of the nice things about pediatrics is that you're seeing mostly healthy patients, or patients who recover partially, if not fully, whereas that's not always the case in adult medicine. You have to really like the family dynamic. So you're not just working with the patient, but usually there's two parents, sometimes siblings, and a whole bunch of other people involved as well. So you're not only working with them, you're educating them, and you have to do a lot of what we call motivational interviewing. So kind of convincing the families to make a change or to do something to help out the patient. And sometimes you're trying to convince a teenager who can't, make their own best decisions because, our brains are still developing through our teen years. And so it's hard to do rational things sometimes. So sometimes you have to kind of convince them to do things. And then the things that we see most in pediatrics are infections. We see genetic disorders, which is why I chose it. We see what we call congenital abnormalities, which means someone was born with something that's different about the anatomy or the build of their body. And then also a lot of issues around development. So how organs develop, how our brain develops, how our cognition develops. And then also pediatrics is a little bit more of what we call purity of pathophysiology. So usually there's only one cause for someone's symptoms. So in other words, if a kid has low energy, probably it's just anemia or low red blood cells, maybe because they don't have enough iron in their diet. Whereas if an adult has low energy, it could be like a little bit of their diabetes, a little bit of their dietary habits, a little bit of their poor sleep, a little bit of not exercising enough. It could be like a lot of different things kind of mishmashed all together. Some people love picking all of that apart. Personally, I do not. So why choose neurology, or the study of the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves, a little bit about the muscles too? So you have to love that kind of neuroanatomy. And you also have to love neuroscience. And neurology in general is a field with a lot of curiosity about how to make a diagnosis. So put a name to what it is that's wrong with someone. And sometimes, unfortunately, in neurology, we don't always have treatments for these things yet, though this is definitely changing over time. So more and more, we're getting genetic treatments and drug treatments to help some of the disorders in neurology. But it's a little bit different from, say, infectious disease, where you say, oh, you have an infection. Here's the 5 different antibiotics that I could give you, the 5 different medicines that'll stop that infection. We don't always have a treatment in neurology yet. But again, there's a lot of research and a lot of excitement there. You really have to like having literally a bag full of tools. So unfortunately, my bag is just a little bit too far out of reach, but I have like a whole bag with all of the equipment that I use to be able to examine people. And I love doing a hands-on physical exam. So I am touching patients. I am moving their body to see their strength. I am seeing what their sensation is. I'm tapping on their reflexes. I'm looking at their skin. So I'm doing all kinds of stuff in order to kind of understand more about their body. As I mentioned, this is a very cutting-edge field for treatments. So they're what we call biologics or monoclonal antibodies that we're trying to use, gene therapy. There's implantable devices that you can give someone a surgery and implant like an electrical stimulation device to help with seizures or with chronic pain. And it's also a very cutting edge field for research. So looking at network properties, neurodevelopment, neurogenetics, regenerative medicine, really exciting. And then why choose genetics? So you have to love biochemistry, genetics, or statistics when you take them, usually as an undergrad or in graduate classes. You mostly prefer kids, but you can handle some adults because a geneticist usually sees both, although again, most genetic disorders kind of have their symptoms or their onset in childhood. And you have to like looking for what we call zebras. So that comes from the term of, in medicine, they say, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. In other words, if someone has symptoms, it's most likely that the disorder they have is one of those common everyday things that everyone has. But every once in a while, it could be a zebra. It could be something rare and unusual that you weren't expecting to find. And genetics is all about finding those zebras and all about what we call the diagnostic odyssey. So seeing someone, trying to figure out what they have, spending a lot of time looking up a whole bunch of papers or contacting researchers who might have had someone similar and talking about it. You have to like treating and advising the entire family, because most things in genetic are inherited or have a risk of being passed on from one generation to the next. So you have to feel comfortable kind of talking about that. You have to be comfortable with hard discussions, breaking bad news, and the uncertainty. So just this morning, I saw a little baby and the parent said, well, you saw the pictures of his brain. What do you think he's going to be like when he grows up? And I had to say, I don't have a crystal ball. So here's what I would feel comfortable guessing. And here's what I don't feel comfortable guessing. Genetics is also an area of cutting edge research. So there's a whole amount of new technology around sequencing or reading the genetic code, especially doing it rapidly. And also looking at what we call multifactorial analysis. So instead of one disease, one gene, what about if one disease could be caused by any one of 5 genes or 10 genes or 100 genes or 1,000 genes that are all interacting with each other? So trying to piece that out. And then prenatal testing is becoming more and more of a cutting edge field. So in other words, when someone is pregnant, how do we try to test or find out things about that fetus, that unborn child before they're even born, so that parents can think about decision making? And then there's also a lot of cutting edge treatments in genetics. So there's what is called enzyme replacement therapy. So if someone has a disease because they don't make a protein or an enzyme that's important in their body, we can actually give it back to them. There's gene therapy, and there's all kinds of new small molecules or drugs that are like pills or infusions that people can take to try to help things out. So here's my last slide, and I'll try to catch up with these questions. So what is my day really like? So I go to clinic 1 or 2 half days a week. I'm on call about 5 weeks out of the year, where I work in the hospital during that time, as opposed to being in the clinic, seeing people who are at home but come to visit with me for a visit. And then I have research time several days a week. So right now I'm working on writing a grant. I'm trying to get out a paper about a rare disorder. And then I also have didactics, or in other words, teaching and educational time for about 2 half days a week, where I go to kind of small group classes or discussions. And also we have kind of presentations that specialists come and give to us. I have meetings all the time for career development and projects and networking. I am working on developing what I call my research and clinical niche. So again, that idea, what is like a small field inside of all of neurogenetics? Is there some kind of basket of disorders inside of there that I'm interested in working on? I'm applying to early career grants. And then I'm trying to work on publishing, papers that are both big and that are small as well. So with that, I will pause there. I'm so excited by all of the questions that I see here. Maybe people can kind of help me filter through a little bit, or feel free to start kind of yelling things out. Did anyone see any particularly good questions that kind of stuck out while I'm trying to go back through?
Yep, so you guys can feel free to use the chat now to ask Becky questions, or you can raise your hand on Zoom. I'll see if I can remove the spotlight so you can see anyone that has their hand raised. Yep, so hopefully, Becky, you can see that 2 kids have their hands raised now. And if you'd like to call on them, or if you want us to filter out some questions too, go ahead.
If you wouldn't mind helping me call out on people while I kind of scroll through, because I think some of the messages came directly to me.
Yeah, no worries. So someone has their hand up, Dana?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what's the work-life balance like in your specialty?
Yeah, great question. So work-life balance has less to do with specialty and more to do with like kind of what decisions someone makes. And so, I have 1 more year left in my training, and I'm trying to get kind of like grants and stuff off the ground. So I would say in general, the work-life balance for someone who is a physician scientist is not as good as someone who just focuses on science or just focuses on clinical stuff, because you're trying to kind of do both at once. But as you see, I have a family, and I try to make sure that in the morning before my son leaves, and in the evening when he's home until he goes to bed, as much as possible, I make sure that I'm trying not to pay attention to my phone too much, and that when I go on vacation, that I try to kind of turn off that other stuff and be able to just be with him. I think in general, as I said, people who choose just science or just clinical work, especially as you get further and further into it and more comfortable, so you're not like always having to look something up, is when people get better work-life balance. But I think in general, the work-life balance is also improving, even just in the time since I had started training. There's more interest in making sure that that's a good balance.
Awesome, thank you. We have a bunch of people who have their hands up, so we're going to go down the line, and then I can call out some questions from the chat too. So Divya, do you have your hand up?
Hi, yeah. Just 1 second. Yeah. So I live in Minnesota, and we have a program called PSEO, and essentially what it is it's you're enrolled in high school and you're enrolled in a college nearby, and you can take college classes. And a decision I'm trying to currently make is whether I should take bio classes or chem classes. Would you recommend one over the other, or both at the same time?
I think just follow what it is that first of all, that sounds like an amazing program. That's so neat. I would just kind of follow the thing that you're excited about, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the most important part, is letting your curiosity and your interest tell you where you should be and what kind of field you're going to want to be into. So if you're able to kind of read them over, and you read over one of them, you're like, oh, wow, this sounds awesome. Then, that would be a really good sign to yourself. So I think either of them would be great for career, for, thinking about what you want to do down the road and helping you out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Pleasure. Before we call on the next person, I found here, someone asked, is shadowing, meaning kind of following a doctor or some other healthcare provider or scientist around, is it only for college students? And I would say, no, you could totally do it at any point. It is usually for people who have not yet kind of gone to graduate school or gone to medical school yet. And so actually, I first shadowed someone when I was in high school. So it's kind of whenever it is that you become interested in it.
Perfect, awesome. So our next question, Jasmine, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really informative. And I just wanted to ask if you know of any medically related jobs that high schoolers can do.
Oh, that's a great question. So again, shadowing is definitely something that someone in high school can do. And, it all depends, technically, if you're under either like 16 or 18, it's really hard to get hired for like a job that like, pays or like has an official role, just because of, like rules, especially at hospitals and universities. But often both clinics are interested in people shadowing or kind of helping out a little bit with, say, like greeting people in clinics, helping patients kind of get through going to visits, things like that. And also a lot of especially like the kind of clinical research where they're doing studies where they're asking people questions and collecting data. Often there can be like a volunteer role for someone who's interested in kind of helping with research like that. Does that kind of help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Of course. Quickly, one from the chat, someone asked me privately, can I be a geneticist with a biochemistry degree? 100%. So genetics has a big arm. That's what we call biochemical genetics. In fact, that's where I was right before this. And so that's where particularly not only is it genetics, but it's genetics of biochemical disorders. So again, those kind of enzymes and things about how the cell actually works, how it like breaks down energy, all of that. So biochemistry degree would be very helpful for being a geneticist. I wish that I had one because then maybe I would have memorized the Krebs cycle properly by now. Okay, what is our next question?
Sure, I think our next question is going to come from Miriam.
Hi. Okay, so my question is, do you recommend what would you recommend an undergrad student to do during the school year, just to keep up with the whole pre-med journey and just not to lose track and not to focus too much on school, but to also kind of keep in mind, like, you know, that the med school application cycle is coming up. Do you recommend anything to do year round in that case?
Yeah, I think one of the helpful things can be to kind of know what the timeline is of kind of what courses would you, if you're interested in med school or called pre-med, what courses do you still have left to take? When are they offered? What are there any volunteer or research or shadowing opportunities that you're interested in? Are there any resources at your university for people who are interested in applying to medical school? Do they have meetings or things like that? And so that way you're not kind of being like surprised or like, oh no, last semester was my only chance to take this class or something along those lines. So just trying to think usually like a semester or two ahead or have kind of like a plan for like when you're going to take those pre-medical or those medical school requirement classes, when might you consider sitting for the MCAT exam? And then when might you have a slightly lighter schedule and you might be interested in doing some of that shadowing or that research or that volunteering. That said, during undergraduate is also really important times, as we were just speaking before about kind of following your passions and your interests. So if you love dancing or some other kind of extracurricular activity, or you're really involved in your community and you do community outreach, those are still things that people love to see on a medical school application. Again, it shows kind of your interest and how you're a person above and beyond just sitting there memorizing chemistry formulas. So I think it's really important to kind of keep those things that make you excited, even if they're not like the exact checky boxes of how to get into medical school. Let's see, on a related note, I see some messages here. Would shadowing doctors as a high schooler be helpful on a resume? Yes, so kind of any time that someone can shadow is helpful. And someone asked, is the process the same or similar for psychiatry? So yes, psychiatry is someone who's a psychiatrist has gone to medical school and then they do a residency in psychiatry. So in other words, a psychiatrist is a doctor. A psychologist or like a psychology therapist could either have a master's or a PhD in psychology. They have not gone to medical school, but they've done other graduate school training, which means that they don't usually prescribe medications, but they might be doing more of the like talk therapy and other types of therapy with people. Okay, what is our next hand raised question?
I think our next hand raise is from Abdiel.
Yes, hi. I love the presentation. My question is, what made you pursue the neuro and genetics fellowship? I find it so interesting.
Yeah, great. So again, it's just about like what kind of makes you curious. And so you'll find that everyone who's in medicine has chosen their particular field for a very specific reason. So when I was in high school was when they were finishing what we call the Human Genome Project. So it's when they first sequenced the human DNA and they put it out there. There's both a private firm and also the government was kind of sponsoring this effort all at once. And so when I was in high school, it was the first time that anyone was able to say, hey, this is what our genetic information looks like, we think. And to me, that was just incredibly exciting. Like this thought that these, like what Gregor Mendel had started with the color of the peas and like those, Punnett squares that you study in biology, that we could now actually look for those changes. I found incredibly exciting. And so as I learned more, initially I learned more and more and did some research in genetics. And then I realized that the part of the body that I was most curious about was the brain, because that's also a field where a lot of research has been going on. And so I took a class on neurobiology and neuroscience, and it just made me so interested to learn more. And then I eventually figured out that I could do both of those things. So I could learn more about how our genetic changes control how our brain is developing. And I realized that studying that in children is, again, that area where you have the most likelihood that the genetics are kind of related to what's going on. Let's see, we have a question from the crowd. What do you do if you don't know what medical career you want? The answer is it's totally okay not to know, even as you go through the process. So if you know that medicine gets you excited, but you don't know what exact part of it, that's okay. Just kind of work your way through. So for instance, when I first got excited about medicine, and eventually I thought, I think of the different types of medicine, I think I would like to be a doctor. At that point, I thought I was going to be a different type of doctor completely. And it was only as I kept on going through the process and had more and more exposure and experience was how I eventually figured out that I wanted to be this kind of a doctor. So I think that shadowing and kind of starting through the process is how people make that decision. And it's also totally okay for people to change their mind. So plenty of people change their mind. They might come to medical school late. They might leave medical school. They might switch and decide which kind of doctor they want to be, might go back and forth a couple of times till they find what is best for them. Okay, what is our next question from the crowd?
So I think we have time for a few more questions. So our next one is from Nikki.
Hi, hello, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm an undergraduate major of genetics, and I'm also getting my minor in neuroscience. So very similar interests. And I do have a couple of questions for you. So for someone who wants to go into the genetics field, would you recommend going directly into a genetics residency, or do you think that I should do like a pediatrics residency and then do like a genetics fellowship?
Great question. That is a little complicated by the fact that there's a new issue. So before, people used to have to do either pediatrics or medicine for 1 to 3 years and then apply for a genetics fellowship because genetics is not something that you can go straight into. You have to have practice medicine for at least a year first. But they realized that that's a little bit of an artificial divide. And so now they've made something, most of the major centers have it, that's kind of like a hybrid model where you apply into the whole program. And it's a mix of the pediatrics training and the genetics training kind of combined together over the span of 4 years. So if you know for sure that genetics is what really excites you, that's the fastest way to become a geneticist. If you're not sure and you want to start with medicine or pediatrics first and then see whether or not genetics is right for you, which some people do because they're not totally sure, then they'll usually take that approach to residency.
I see. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Should I go to a specific med school then?
That they
specialize in genetics, or?
Yeah, I think go to whatever medical school gets you excited, or for instance, if there's a place that has in-state tuition, that's really appealing. Let me tell you, med school loans are no joke. So I think of the different things about like where's somewhere that's like a location you're excited about that may or may not have like tuition things that you're excited or not excited about. And then, as you said, finding places that either have a combined, they call it a combined genetics residency, or at least have a strong genetics department, means that even if you don't end up staying there for your residency for whatever reason, that at the very least you're going to get a lot of fantastic exposure. So yes, many people will choose their medical school or their graduate school kind of based on what they hope to do down the road, both because they'll get to see that during their initial training and the possibility of maybe staying on. To that extent, there's a private message sent to me saying, what happens if sometimes your grades are not all A? The answer is that's totally okay. So yes, we all want to do as well as we can in classes, but none of us are perfect. We don't always have all A's. And so I think one thing that someone can do if they're worried about what their GPA might look like is to keep on taking advanced courses and showing that they can continue to do really well. And the other thing would be to understand that it's, not everyone is showing up who's applying to these programs with like a 4.0 or anything. So never be embarrassed or feel like you can't apply to things just because the numbers are not picture perfect.
Awesome, thank you. So I think we have time for one more question. So we'll hear from Gio, and then Becky, if there's anything else you want to answer, feel free to go ahead.
Hi, my name is Gio, and thank you so much for your presentation. You outlined it really clearly and really helped me. So my question was, I actually have a few in mind, but I'll only ask like one or two. So is it possible to do like no research? Because I'm more interested in like the clinical side of the medicine. And I heard that like med schools, they look at your research and things. So is it possible to do no research at all?
Absolutely, yeah. I would say that if you talk to doctors across the entire country or across the entire world, the majority of them are not doing any research. That said, those doctors who do no research are often usually in private practice, in community practice, or might be like what we call clinical focus. They're less likely to be working at like a major hospital or institution because those places tend to encourage people to be doing even just a little bit of research on the side or to be doing some teaching on the side. But I think the most common thing in the entire world is for someone to just be doing clinical practice. But I just want to let you know, being a doctor doesn't mean that you're limited to that. You have lots of other things that you can do too.
Okay, thank you. And one last question I have is I'm thinking of taking the combined medical program where you just like go straight to like med school right after high school and then take like the 6, 7, or 8 year pathway. So what would you recommend to do at high school in order to get into that program? And do you think 6 or 7 or 8 year program is better? And when you see those doctors who graduated from these medical programs, like what do you think about them? Do you think they're a bit immature or kind of unprepared?
Oh, I don't think anyone who, first of all, I think the programs are really exciting. And I had applied, I think there's only one that existed when I was applying to undergraduate, and I had applied to it as well. And I thought a lot about it. I don't think that anyone who comes out of it is immature. I think it shows a lot of certainty and a lot of kind of self-knowledge about wanting to go into medicine. I don't think it necessarily makes a difference how many years go into it, as long as there's like a strong focus on making sure that all those the essentials basically are in there. So a lot of focus on the science. Usually they'll do that by cutting out some of the other stuff. So for instance, I ended up going to a traditional undergraduate instead of a combined program because I really wanted to study English literature and I wanted to take cognitive science classes and I wanted to take more of the basic science classes than I would have if I'd gone to a combined program, because the only one that existed at that time really limited you to kind of like the basics. So I think just kind of thinking about them, like, weighing the pros and cons of each individual one would be helpful. But I think that they're a fantastic approach for people to be able to cut off some of the extra years and get into what they're really excited about early.
Thank you.
Of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so that will wrap up our segment with Becky. We've just linked the thank you form for her there. So if you would all be kind enough to take a second to just fill out a quick form to say thank you to Becky for taking her time to make a presentation and come to talk to us, that would be amazing. But thank you so much, Becky, for coming to speak to us. We really do appreciate it. There was a ton of information and we hope you have a great rest of your night.
You bet. And I'm so sorry if I didn't get to everyone's questions. Hopefully I'm scrolling through them now and I think we kind of touched on some of them. I'm so impressed not only by everyone who organized this, but by all of you for being so involved and so active. And I'm wishing you all the best. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. All right. So with that, we're going to kind of transition into our medical interactive. So Jalen and Alex, you can both feel free to take it away. So the way that this will work is it's a Jeopardy game filled with a bunch of medical and STEM trivia. So once you know the answer, you can type it in the chat and send it to everyone so that way we can all see it. And if you answer the question correctly and you're the first one to send it, then you can pick the next question that we have. And again, something that you guys filled out in our feedback form was that having set end times would be really beneficial. So our set end time today is 6:20. We would love it if you guys could stay after, finish the Jeopardy with us. But of course, we understand that you have other commitments. So at 6:20, that's when you're no longer obligated to stay with us. But we will let them take it away and you can both start your Jeopardy. Let us know if you have any questions.
Hello guys, so Alex will be picking the first category and the number, and then we're going to go pick people after that once you guys have chosen the answers. So we can start now.
All right, so I say we just start off with something everyone's familiar with. We'll go COVID-19 and 300 just to play it safe. All right, and the first question is, what percentage of the worldwide population is fully vaccinated?
You guys can just put in your answers in the chat, and this is a fairly difficult question. So we have 50, a lot of variations. Forgot how many people there are. There's so many. All right, I think we can choose the answer and see who's the closest.
Okay. And the correct answer was 10.2%.
Yeah, and also this might be a little bit out of date because everyone is getting the vaccine at different times, but I did this around like 2 weeks ago or 3. Yeah, so, and this is the worldwide population. So 10%, someone did say that.
I can see that from Hal. I think they sent it at 606, they said 10%.
I think it was Hallelujah.
Yeah, them.
All right, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Hopefully you heard. Hallelujah. No? Okay, we will choose. Okay, we're gonna do neurology. Does anyone have a number, or we can just choose a random one? 200. Neurology 200.
All right. Label at least 3 sections of a neuron. Wish I could have the Jeopardy music, but I could not figure that out.
Right. Okay. At least 3. All right, I think we can choose an answer now. I think it's stopped.
Okay, and your options were cell body, nucleus, axon, dendrites, axon terminals, and myelin sheath.
All right, there's so many answers. Let's do iris. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Okay, we can choose someone else. Let's see who is after Iris.
I think Kamal might have been.
Okay.
First.
You said Kamal?
Yeah.
Okay, Kamal, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Oh, it's okay. Biomed 300. You guys can type in the category numbers in the chat. You don't have to say it. But there's Biomed for 300.
Okay. Which molecule contains genetic information that directs the creation of proteins?
Getting a lot of DNA. I think we have like 1 RNA, 2. Okay. All right, I think we can choose a category. The answer.
All right, and the correct answer was ribonucleic acid, or RNA.
We have a lot of DNAs. That is okay. I'm trying to choose the first RNA, which is Isabella. If you want to choose a category and a number, you can.
Yeah, we can do surgical 400.
Okay, all right. All right, what is the average lifespan of a red blood cell in the normal human body?
7 days, a week. 7 what? Years, days. All right, I think we can choose, show the answer.
Okay, and the answer was 4 months, which I think we said was about 120 days.
All right, thank you. So Daniel Fry, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you are more than welcome to.
Yeah, pharmaceutical for 400.
Okay, awesome. So the world's first successful vaccine was for which disease?
A lot of polio. We have one for smallpox. A lot for smallpox. Okay. All right, I think we can choose an answer. Show the answer.
Okay, and the answer was actually smallpox, introduced by Edward Jenner in 1796, which again was the first vaccine to be developed.
All right, Tiffany Wei, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you are more than welcome to. Neurology for 300.
Okay. All right, how many brain imaging techniques can you name? Name them all.
I said 5. All right, I'm going to choose the one who has the most. Ooh. Wow, okay, so I'm going to have to count these. 1, 2.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and read the answer.
Yeah, we can show the answer. People are tied.
All right, there's a lot in total. There's MRI, fMRI, DTI, PET scan, CT scan, all of these options. Take your pick.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, we have a 7. Okay, so Lauren, Pepas, if you want to choose a category and the number, you have the most.
Surgical 300.
All right. Name 3 surgical instruments.
All right, at least 3. Or if you can name more, then that's fine too. Okay, I think we can choose an answer, and I'm going to choose.
Okay. So we have scalpels, scissors, saws, forceps, clamps, retractors, etc. Of course, there's more.
Yeah, there's a lot more. All right, and do you know if hammer is a surgical tool?
Sorry, it was hammer?
Yeah, that one I do not know. I don't.
Not sure if I've ever seen a hammer being used, but maybe it's a new surgical technique.
Maybe. So Alyssa, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Maybe I should do first and last names.
Random for 300.
Awesome. Okay, first random. What blood type do you need to be a universal donor?
Oh, wow. Okay. Everyone. All right. I think they get it. We can choose the answer.
All right, everyone was quick with that one. O negative.
Yes. I have to scroll all the way up. So first one for O negative was Prahambranor for Paul. I don't think I said your name right. I'm so sorry. Oh, thank you. All right, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. I hope that. Thank you. Random for 500.
Okay, staying on random, first 500. What is carbon black? Definitely a 500 question.
Material, you can give your best description or an educated guess. A color, that is true. Powder, chemical. You guys aren't wrong. All right, I think we can choose and show the answer now. I keep saying choose.
Okay, and the answer was carbon black is an air pollutant emitted by vehicles that can cause respiratory and cardiovascular health problems. Interesting.
So I'm going to try to choose the best one. Let's okay, I'm going to try to choose it. Who had the closest? So I'd say an element. You're not wrong. Okay, let's do a mineral for Anika Ravi. If you want to choose a category.
It's still on the answer screen.
Oh, so sorry. Okay.
Oh no, you're good. We can do COVID for 200.
All right. Going back to COVID. How many vaccine candidates for COVID-19 have been proposed? And this is worldwide.
Second year at Mayo is like CCL and similar to her. So very involved in research. I do a lot of work.
All right, I think we can choose, 1,000. I think we can choose a category of the answer.
Okay. All right. And the answer was more than 120 according to the World Health Organization. 120 vaccines have been proposed.
Yeah, that's insane. So someone said 300, which technically is more than 100. So let's see, Sherry, I think, say your name. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Yeah, sure. Let's do biomedical for 500.
All right, awesome. Going back to 500. True or false? When lightning hits a tree, the water inside the tree boils and expands, blowing the tree apart. Very
By the way,
descriptive.
this is supposed to be a fun fact. Not in biomed. So we have true, a lot of truths. Sounds like a true problem, yeah. All right. Okay,
Right.
I think we can choose the answer.
And the answer was 50-50. It is true. That actually does happen.
All right, if Nadish wants to choose a category and a number, then you can. Surgical for 300. I mean, for 500.
Okay. All right, staying on 500. What is the only part of the body that can't heal and repair on its own? The heart, the nostril, or the teeth or a tooth?
Right, so like tooth, nostrils. All right, I think we can choose an answer. Choose an answer or show the answer.
And the correct answer was a
Yes.
tooth. A tooth cannot repair itself. Interesting.
All right, and I'd say, there's a lot. Okay, so Sharia, if you want to choose a category, thank you. Random for 400.
All right. Marie Curie was instrumental in developing what as a therapeutic tool?
One X-ray, radiation. Radioactive. All right, I think we can choose a category. I keep saying that. Choose an answer.
All right, and the correct answer was magnetic resonance imaging or MRIs.
So no one said an MRI. Yeah, so Alex, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Okay, I'll go ahead and choose the next one. Let's do, you know what? We'll just throw out another 500 at everyone. Let's do neurology for 500. So what area of the brain controls vision?
Right. Okay, everyone is on the right track. Good job, guys. All right, I think we can show the answer now.
Right, the correct answer was the occipital lobe, which is in the back part of the brain.
Good job. So Nadish, if you want to choose a category and a number, you're the first one to say that. So pharmaceuticals for 300.
Okay. What enzyme is responsible for breaking down starches?
Oh, good job. Wait, carbohydrate. I'm sorry if the chat is freezing. Everyone's typing so fast in like seconds. All right, I think we can choose the answer.
All right, and the correct answer was amylase.
All right, Emily Lynn, if you want to choose a category, thank you. And a number, then you can. Bio for 400.
All right. What organism is not a eukaryotic organism? E. coli bacteria, grass, or tapeworms?
right, we're getting a lot of E. coli. Okay. 1 for grass. All right, I think we can do the answer.
Okay, and well, I think this one's a little messed up, but the correct answer was E. coli, if I'm correct.
It was E. coli.
All right. It is
All
E.
right,
coli.
let's see. So, Geo Kim, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Neurology 400.
All right. How long can the brain survive without oxygenated blood?
We have 5 minutes, 1 minute, 10, 30 seconds, an hour, 2 minutes, 15, 3 to 6. All right, I think we can show the answer.
Okay, and the correct answer was 4 to 6 minutes before the cells begin to die. And actually, after 10 seconds, you lose consciousness.
All right, so Sajid, you said 3 to 6 minutes, so you were closest. If you do want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Yeah, you can stay if you want to. It is 6:22. So if you guys want to keep playing, then we are happy that you guys can. So pharmaceuticals for 500.
Okay. Sorry, I thought this was the last 500. Never mind. Second to last 500. All right. Which instrument used for listening to the heart was invented in 1817?
Stethoscope. All right, a lot of stethoscope. I just got tongue-tied saying that. All right, I think we can show the answer.
Okay, and yes, it is stethoscope. Nice job.
I don't know why I cannot say that word. Stethoscope. Gia Kim, you can choose a category and the answer again. I mean, a number.
COVID-19 500.
Okay, last 500. What are other viruses belonging to the coronavirus family?
SARS, COVID-18. Right. Okay, everyone's saying same thing.
Okay. The answer was yes, MERS and SARS.
Two people said SARS and MERS. So Ria, if you want to choose a category and a number, you said them both. So
Okay, so biomedical 200.
All right, good choice. Which cells fight foreign organisms in the body?
yes, good job, guys. T cells, you're not wrong. White blood cells. Yeah. All right, you guys are getting the hang of it. We can show the answer.
Okay, the answer that we have is white blood cells.
That there are a lot of answers for this. So I'm glad you asked how specific we can be, but I chose white blood cells. So if let's see. I think it was, I have no clue. So I'm going to choose one. Let's choose Lauren. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Neurology 100.
All right, last in the neurology category, how much does the brain weigh?
So, 5 pounds, 400 grams, 2% of body weight. All right, I think we can show the answer, 3 kilograms.
Okay, and the answer we have, definitely an average about 3 pounds.
So I am very bad at converting. Let's see. Does obese people have heavier brains? That is a great question. I don't have that answer for sure, but that would be really cool if they did have. Okay, so I'm going to choose. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Okay, let's do Numa. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Sure. Let's do COVID-19 400.
All right, the last large question. What does COVID-19 stand for?
Coronavirus 19. Coronavirus disease 2018. Coronavirus infectious disease. All right, good job, guys. We can show the answer.
Okay, I think everyone's mostly correct. CO stands for corona, vi virus, D for disease, and then of course 2019.
So all of you guys had the correct answer. So I'm going to try to be fair and just like scroll and see who I click on. So let's do Kamal Mur. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Pharmaceuticals for 200.
Okay. What's something helpful you can give to a person who might be having a heart attack? 1, an aspirin, 2, Tylenol, or 3, chest compressions.
All right, so it's between, I get a lot of aspirin and chest compressions. 1 and 3, oh, both. Okay. Only 1, all right. Okay, I think we can choose the answer.
Okay, and the answer we have is aspirin.
Yes.
Yeah, just to briefly elaborate, sorry to interrupt. So if you guys remember back to our first session, our CPR workshop, thank you, Ria, for putting that in the chat. Please keep in mind that cardiac arrest and heart attacks are different. So cardiac arrest is when your heart stops. You need chest compressions. You need your heart to start beating again. But in the case of a heart attack, one of your arteries or your major arteries becomes blocked, but your heart is still beating. So please don't try to do CPR on someone that's having a heart attack because their heart is beating. So you would actually then risk breaking a rib, puncturing a lung, etc. So remember, heart attack, aspirin, cardiac arrest, CPR. And you can go back to our slides and view all this stuff. So I'm kind of glad a lot of you got confused because then that means that there's something we can clarify.
All right, so Samritha, I hope I said your name right. Samritha. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Biomed for 100.
Okay, last in the biomed category. What is a salmonella?
Bacteria, yes. Parasites. Bacteria outside of eggshells. Egg cells that can cause diarrhea. That is really specific. Parasites from eating raw eggs. All right.
Okay.
You guys are getting the hang of it, so we can show the answer.
All right. Salmonella are bacteria that are responsible for more hospitalizations and deaths than any other type of bacterium or virus found in food.
Yeah, so it is a bacteria and you do find it in food. So everyone is correct. All right, so I'm going to try to choose someone that hasn't gone yet. And Richard, you have not gone. So if you would choose a category and a number, then you can.
Random 100.
All right. Humans share 98.8%.
Oh wait, I might have been the wrong Richard.
Okay.
All good. All right. In any case, humans share 98.8% of their DNA with which animal? A chimpanzee, apes, or dolphins?
All right, so we're getting a lot of chimpanzees and no dolphins. I think that kind of gave it away.
Okay, and the correct answer was chimpanzee.
Yeah, and chimpanzees was the first one, I believe, right?
Number one.
So Divya, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
I'll go with surgical 200.
All right. High blood pressure is also known as what?
Hypertension. Hypertension. All right, you guys are like on the jackpot right now.
Quick answers with that one. Yes, the correct answer was hypertension.
Oh, I did give it away. Sorry. I apologize. All right, so let's choose Zainab. If you want to choose a category and a number, then you can.
Random/fun facts for 200.
Okay. Last in the random category, what medical term means without symptoms?
Jeez, you guys typed so fast. Okay, I am not gonna give away the answer anymore. All right, I think we can show the answer.
Okay. Again, with the quick answers, asymptomatic, a word you hear a lot related to COVID-19.
Good job, guys. So Iris, if you want to choose a category and a number, then you can. Surgical. Oh yeah, there's only one. Surgical.
All right, surgical, last in the surgical category. Which of your organs has stopped if you are experiencing a cardiac arrest? Speaking of cardiac arrest again.
Okay. Oh, Daviana, they're saying that you gave it away. You gave the answer. All right, you can choose a category and a number that you can.
Okay. Again, yeah, the answer was heart.
Guys.
Great job.
All right, so I'm going to choose someone who hasn't gone yet. So it's early two. Emily Chen, if you want to go and choose a number, then you can. Pharmaceutical.
All right, second to last question. When was the first hospital pharmacy in America established? 1889, 1751, or 1895?
All right, we're getting ones and twos, maybe like 2 3s. Two. Yeah, this is educated guess. It's okay if you guys don't know this one. All right, I think you can choose the answer.
Okay, and the correct answer was 1751. The Pennsylvania Hospital was founded in that year in Philadelphia, which I think that was number 2.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to choose one. Oh wait, there's only one more left.
Only
So
one left. All right, last question. COVID-19 for 100. True or false? COVID-19 has currently been detected on all 7 continents.
getting a lot of false. A lot of false. All right. I think we can show the answer. Last answer for today.
Final answer, 50-50 chance. False. According to the CDC, COVID-19 has been detected in Africa, the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Australia, but not Antarctica.
Good job, guys.
Right.
Guys, it's so good. Hope you guys had fun playing the game with us and our Jeopardy. And yeah, I'll give it to Daviana.
All right, everyone. So thank you so much for playing the Jeopardy with us and for sticking around, even though you technically didn't have to. So again, what I'm going to do right now is link our feedback form there. So you don't have homework for this week. And well, you do, but it'll be released at the end of the week. So as opposed to, doing a homework form after every session, it'll just be one form at the end of the week. Hopefully that's less overwhelming for you. And of course, this recording will be on our Google Drive. It'll also be on YouTube, but we would really, really appreciate it if everyone could fill out the form I just linked in the chat, the feedback form. So that's really how we gauge how well this program is working for all of you. So thank you again for everyone that's already filled out back the feedback form. We've responded to it and we've made changes to implement implemented in the program. So if there's something that is working for you in the program, let us know. If there's something that isn't working, please let us know as well. And again, you don't have to leave your name. It can be totally anonymous if you don't want a response. So you can fill that out and let us know what's working or what isn't working. And we would really appreciate it because then we know, how we're doing here. So is it one form for each individual session or one form for the whole week? So last week for the 3 sessions that we had, it was 3 individual forms. This week it's going to be 1 form at the end of the week. And do we have Dr. Levi's socials? Can we tag her? So she unfortunately is not on Instagram and Twitter or anything that we can tag her on. But if you do repost us and you tag us on Instagram or something, we'll be sending those pictures to Dr. Levi so she can kind of have them as, I don't know, a memo of her guest speaking here. And where should you be in your research symposium? Yeah, so you guys are all more than welcome to leave now if you don't have any questions for us or if you have other commitments. Again, our next session is tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's just straight shadowing. There's no workshops from us, so it should be shorter. And then our next official session is on Thursday, and then we have office hours for the research symposium on Friday. So someone else asks, where should we be in our symposium? So again, for all of you that let us know that you don't have a group yet, we're in the process of making groups for you all. So once that's done, hopefully by the middle to the end of this week, you have a group, you guys kind of know what you want to do, and then over the weekend, you can work on your solution and stuff and have it ready for the middle of next week.
I was just curious if there's some sort of registration form for our groups.
Yeah, so when you're done with your presentation, we're going to be sending out a form that's linked to our program's email account. So you fill out that form, you type in the names of everyone in your group, and then you attach a link to your presentation. It can be a link to a YouTube video, a link to a Loom video, a link to your Google Slides. You can have a bunch of links there if you've recorded it, and you also need to attach your slides or your document or anything. So just feel free to link everything there. But as opposed to you emailing us, we're just going to do a form instead because it's easier for us to keep track of it and make sure that you get credit.
Okay, awesome. And I had another question. Will we have to like fill in some sort of slot? Like, I know my group wants to go first, so is that possible, or is it just like first come, first serve?
So the way that we had initially planned this is if you want to present at the research symposium, we have a set number of spots depending on how long everyone's presentation is. So that's going to be a question on the form that you'll have to fill out. So when you're letting us, when you're giving us the links and the names of everyone in your group, you have to let us know how long your presentation is, because we know that some people's presentations will be shorter, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and others will be longer, 15 minutes. So we can't allocate the same time for everyone. So that's how we make decisions on who's going to go first, second, third, just because of our timing, because we can't run too much over. So when we know how long everyone's presentations is, that's how we can gauge how many presentations we can have in that day. And we're going to try to get as many of you in as possible. We promise that we will make our best efforts to have all of you there and have all of you presenting. But if we have like 50 groups that are 10 minutes each, we unfortunately can't have everyone there. So then we will be left to kind of choose from the people that filled out the form first. But please don't take that as a sign to rush anything, or make sure try to get your submission in first so that you can present, because we want you guys to have good presentations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yep, you too. No problem. And are the certificates going to be a digital PDF? Yes, they're going to be a digital PDF that you can print out at home. It's just easier for us to send that to you instead of trying to ship everything out. But it's something that you can download, print. You can use it on your college applications. You can upload it to LinkedIn. We'll be including some tutorials on how you can use this on your college apps, how you can use this on med school apps if you want to use this for med school apps, grad school apps, any other job applications, adding this experience to your LinkedIn, etc. And will the people who present live only be eligible for awards? So we have several different award categories. So some of our award categories are for speaking. So if you want to be considered for a speaking award, then you would have to present live, but you don't have to present live in order to be eligible for the best biomedical solution or the best engineering solution or the best public health. And who can we put in as contact if you want to list this in the AMCAS? So you can put us as contacts. Do you mean a specific person, or do you mean someone like the organization as a whole, like the organization's email? Because we can give you that information too. And of course, if you have any questions about that, yeah. So Momina, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. Just send me a message on Slack and I can give you all the information you need for that.
where do we submit our projects when we're done? So by tomorrow or the day after, we're going to be releasing a form where you submit your projects there. It should either be a link, or if you're using a PDF, then just let us indicate on the form that it's a PDF and you've emailed it to us. And that form will also be on our itinerary. It'll be posted in a message on Slack, so everything will be there. And the research symposium is not mandatory. Again, we want to emphasize that we are not trying to force you to do research or spend a lot of time on this, because this program in and of itself is already a big chunk of a commitment. So we don't want to make the research symposium mandatory. It's really just if you want to dive into some cool research and work with some kids here.